Hello, this is Michael. I'm one of the developers for a game called Break, which was an entry in the 2020 7-Day Roguelike Challenge. I wanted to give a little bit of a retrospective on my experience working on the game this year. I thought I'd start with a little bit of a summary of the game, talk about working as a team on a 7-Day Roguelike, and some of our goals for the year, and then a few of the elements that I thought other developers might find interesting about the game, including our data-driven approach, the map generator, the director and narrator that we use to tell the story of the game, and the trigger event system that I used, and wrap up with a retrospective on the year. Just an overall view of Break itself. It's a roguelike that closely follows the Berlin definition with procedural generation of the maps, permanent death, and turn-based movement and combat. The player character is having delusions, and so we wanted to create this strange kind of fantasy-esque world and have it be a little bit disorienting for the player. We also have a couple of different voices that continue to talk to the player that are somewhat wrestling for control of the player character. And the combat in the game is a standard bump and move system that would see in other roguelikes, as well as an 8-way directional ranged combat system, which allows you to fire in one of the 8 directions, but also lets you get an idea of how you can use sort of a cover system to approach enemies through the gaps in that firing pattern, because some enemies also have ranged combat. There's also a scroll system that just has some basic abilities that you might find, such as restoring health or shooting fireballs, different things like that. Here's a couple of gifs of the game you can see. Just moving through the game, you can see the white and the red text appearing under the character. Those are examples of the different voices that are talking to the character throughout the game. So this was my first year collaborating on creating a 7-Day roguelike. I had asked a couple of friends to participate, probably a little bit close to the challenge due to the fact that they were out of town, which didn't leave us a ton of time for planning. But I thought it might be something they would be interested in doing this year. One of my friends was a dungeon master in some D&D campaigns and had a little bit of experience doing art, and the other had some programming background. So I thought it might be fun for us to work together, and it actually really was. We kind of came up with our concept and worked on that a little bit before the event to figure out what it was we wanted to do, and then we ended up switching that concept right before the start of the game. And I think the concept that we moved to is actually perhaps a more interesting concept. So I'm glad that we made the switch, but it definitely kind of changed our whole direction right near the end there. Also, the team members that I used this year had somewhat limited time availability, and so that definitely made it challenging for us to find time to work together throughout the week. Really, our goals for the year were to have a positive experience working together as a group. I really hope to expose my friend to the idea of game development and show them that it was possible to create a game in 7 days. I had really hoped by having other people involved it would generate a lot more ideas, and it definitely did. And through that different idea generation and different feedback throughout the entire course of the game was to make a better game than I had made in the past, as well as a game with more content than anything I had created before. And I had wanted to start from the wing tile generator that I had created last year in the 2019 challenge, so that we would be able to really focus on just creating a game with a lot of content and not have to start from square one again on the actual map generation and other components of the game. Another thing that I did that was interesting for this year was to try to make everything data-driven, and this was a lot to make things accessible for the team members involved, so that as they're creating levels and monsters and items and have ideas, they can actually just go in and edit the configuration files and make changes to the game. This isn't something I had done in the past for myself. I had probably hard-coded the majority of this in the game itself, but it was actually really interesting to externalize a lot of this. and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It did take somewhat of an upfront initial investment to export everything into files and read it into the game, but that really allowed everyone to make changes to the game, and for my friend who was doing the art to be able to create content and then put it into the game right away, including levels and monsters. And that was actually an exciting thing every day to see the progress and to actually load the progress into the game and see what it looked like. It allowed us to create a lot of content quickly. As things go at 7-Day Roguelikes, we ended up making a lot of content near the last couple of days, but because it was just editing configuration files or creating an image, we were able to really get a lot of stuff done in the last couple of days. And it allowed us to continue to tweak balance right up to the end of the challenge by just going in and editing these different configuration files and come up with something we were happy with. These are a couple examples of some of the files, one for a monster and one for an item in the game, just a way to really demonstrate how we use this system. We did have an animation system on the monsters, as well as the behavior element allowed you to specify different AI types that he had, which we obviously created via code, but allowed you to specify the behavior of the creature as well as what the sprite was for the creature. And then, we had some basic controls to try to keep like the level ranges for the items, as well as the probability of those items appearing in the game, and ways to adjust the different balance for these things. So to create an item, you could just make an entry in the table. And if you wanted to have a sprite for it, you could also provide a sprite, or you could just use the treasure chest sprite. The map generation was the same generator that I used last year. I actually gave a separate talk about that and would encourage you to check that out. It was actually really interesting approach, I thought, and I was hoping to press that a little bit more this year, but because of time constraints, we didn't get to do as much experimenting with the generator as I would have hoped. But we did do something really cool this year, which was swap out the actual theme of the map as you're playing through the game. It actually swaps to a different theme, and this is kind of part of creating that strange environment for the character to walk through that seems a little bit trippy or unusual when suddenly the whole theme of the map changes and then changes back to give them kind of that experience. And that was something we were able to do with the way that I created the generator. I would encourage you to check out the other presentation if you're interested in how I do the actual map generation with wing tiles. A neat thing that I did this year, because we really wanted to have a story-driven game, was come up with these concepts of a narrator and a director in the game. The narrator is really the element that spoke to the player throughout the game and the different voices. And this was a relatively simple typewriter effect presentation of text right under the player character in a couple of different colors. And a couple different colors indicated the conflict that the player had between the two different voices. And then I had a director in the game that could do different camera movements, zoom and shake, and changing of color. It also kept track of turns and progression of the story throughout the game, and kind of helped direct the game through the use of these data-driven scripts that I had added into the game. There's a trigger and event system which really drives all of this. The triggers were the different things happening throughout the game, such as the advancing of a turn, some different attacks happening. There was a trigger for the player attacking for the first time on a level, which we used as part of the story. There were also things like random chance per turn of event, like a 1% chance each turn of a certain text appearing. And then the events are the things that happen when the triggers went off. So for like the attack event, the screen would shake a small amount, or having narration occur on certain turn counts, or having the camera move at different specific points to go along with the narration. We can have triggers that schedule to occur later in the game, such as when the theme of the room swaps to a different theme, to wait a certain number of turns to swap back. And I just used like a basic publish subscribe messaging system to accomplish this. I believe this is similar to how other games might do achievements or quest systems, so it's not necessarily anything new, but it was something fun to incorporate into the game. And because these are all done through the configuration files, you can actually go in and edit these. Working as a team this year was really fun. I mean, it definitely was a highlight of the year for me. It definitely presented some unique challenges. Working with other people and teaching other people about game development. And definitely if you choose to try this in the future, don't underestimate the amount of time it will take to collaborate and coordinate and communicate and do all those things together as a team. It is important, I think, to have a plan, but to be flexible. We definitely found about midway through the week that we weren't going to be able to realize our full vision, and we had to be flexible together to be able to finish the challenge in time. And definitely as a group, that's a little bit harder of a decision to make. I really did feel like the collaboration was very high, and that a lot of the ideas came out of us working together and talking through those different ideas, and that was definitely worthwhile to me. The other thing I thought was really fun was just the whole externalizing of everything into these data and configuration files. We probably had less time to actually use those than I expected, and it was probably a little bit harder to have people edit the JSONs directly, and so making an interface for those certainly would be nice if you were doing a longer game, and probably would do that. But this also had an interesting side effect of having the game have mod capabilities, so that anybody playing the game could really just go in and add a creature, add a level, do whatever they want if they understand how the configuration files work. One thing that kind of came about a little bit by accident, but I had heard of from other games, was whiteboxing the game, and we did this probably around day 5 when we were realizing we were getting close to the end, and we decided to just map out what was left in the game to finish still, and put templates or kind of basically blank rooms and blank enemies in place to hold the place for these elements that we still needed to finish, so we knew how much content we needed to finish before the end of the 7 days, as well as have an idea of what is a total game going to look like to the end. By and large, I was very happy and proud of what we did throughout the year. It was awesome to see our game come together at the end, and we had a really exciting event with a couple of other friends on Discord the night that we were wrapping up, where they were giving us their feedback, and we were incorporating bug fixes and feedback into the game as we were hearing it from them. And really the end of that experience was really terrific and fun, and just I would recommend to anyone to try doing this as a group experience. I wanted to say a quick thanks for a couple of the elements that we pulled into the game. One of the fonts that we used was Amatic SC, and then last year my project was based on RogueSharp and the RogueSharp Unity port, so I used those again this year. And then I wanted to thank my 2 team members for participating in the event this year. I was definitely glad that they gave it a try, and hope that they had as great an experience as I had. And I hope you enjoyed the talk. If there's anything you have questions about, I'd be glad to answer them. And I hope that you'll also give the game a try. Thank you very much.